but Tim Davie was warning over the growing assault on truth as he calls for solidarity with journalists facing intimidation and harassment across the globe. There he is grinning. You can grin quite a lot if you earn £664,000 a year. But we've got a little bit of video clip where Tim Davie was interviewed by the Financial Times. I found this a very interesting little clip. Let's have a listen.
Now, Tim, we all have our own special relationship with the BBC in the UK, and you've got vast amounts of news output. You can't possibly monitor it all and watch it all. What do you actually listen and watch on a daily basis?
Personally, I spread it around a bit. So actually, I'm joining you from Glasgow. So I've been with the Good Morning Scotland team, and actually the Scottish Channel 9 bulletin last night, Alex. So the answer to your question is I'm immersed in Scottish politics, the Scottish fan zone. So to your question, I mean, I do kind of have quite a broad listening and viewing kind of selection that I'll go through. I'll also make sure that that the really landmark programs, whether it's the 6 o'clock news, 10 o'clock news, Today, and Panorama, you're across. That's the job.
And do you, as editor-in-chief, do you want more decisions coming up to your level, or less in the way that you'd be running the BBC?
I think we're pretty well balanced, but certainly not. It's not about all of the things coming through the system to me. I mean, in some ways you can over-exaggerate the curiosities of the BBC. You think about if you were running a big retail operation, you need those processes, you need those systems so that store managers in that scenario can make their decisions. For me, empowered good editors with proper process. I mean, we're making thousands of hours. And as to your point, we have our traumas. We make mistakes now and again. But actually, across the world, as we speak today, we've got a brilliant set of editors with very good guidelines, delivering very high quality news coverage. I don't think the system works. I think it's right that I'm editor-in-chief and you make those really big calls and you come in and set the tone and do the things you need to. And now and again, there's a call, just like there would be in any business.
Well, indeed. And you've made impartiality a big kind of theme since taking over. Do you feel like you've corrected whatever you wanted to correct already, or are you going to have to look at more structural changes as well? Is there more to come?
This is an ongoing project, yeah. And I thought, and I've been very open about it, I think, which is, I think the issue for us was not primarily, although there's a lot of noise around it, if you're the national broadcaster, our intent is absolutely to be impartial, offer fair and balanced coverage.
Well, that makes me feel a lot better.
Well, there is a man earning £664,000 a year, and we noticed that when he was asked a simple question, what do you watch of the BBC's output, he simply didn't answer the question. He said where he was, and he happened to be up in Scotland. So that part of the question not answered. He then talks about empowered, brilliant editors who he then freely admits have been making mistakes, causing problems. This guy is not real, Mike, is he?
And he went on to say, I don't think the system works. I mean, that's clearly, I presume maybe he was telling us what he actually thought. But more structural changes were required to deal with the impartiality situation. Does that mean structural changes? That means firing people and replacing them with more woke people? Is that what it is, David?
Well, firing people and replacing them with people of the right skin tone, I think, is one of the things. But of course, he was watching the BBC Scottish 9 News, right? And that was very interesting because he was a very substantial part of their total audience. Right? The average from a population of 5.5 million, the average 15,000 for their Premier News show. So yeah, that's not very good. And but he also watched Good Morning Scotland. But I wonder if he'd ever heard their coverage of the named person when they tried so hard in Good Morning Scotland to set up a demolition of the No to Name Person campaign, and they set all the experts up, but they made a mistake of making it open to phone-ins from the public, and they had the biggest on-air disaster you ever heard in your life. It was very glorious. So there's occasionally Good Morning Scotland can be worth a listen. Not often, though.
Okay, David. Well, I've got to add that a little while ago, I emailed Tim Davie personally to ask him why the BBC hadn't reported 500,000 plus people demonstrating in London, and also why the BBC was simply not talking about the MHRA yellow card vaccine adverse reactions. Well, Tim sent me an email back, which we did show this. Just
Sorry.
hold that one, Mike. Sorry. Which he did send me an email back at that time saying that he'd received my email, but because he received a lot of emails, he couldn't answer me. But he did send me an email to tell me that he couldn't answer me, but he didn't want to answer me. He then promised me that his team would respond to my email. Well, sure, step by step, the days and weeks went past, so I sent him another email saying that, of course, he'd now proved that what he said was not to be trusted. And to my surprise, his team, a couple of days ago, did produce an email to answer my questions. Now, we're going to put it on screen so that people know what I'm talking about is real, but there's a lot of small print. But I guarantee you this is from the BBC team, so let's have a look. It said that they're sorry that I didn't receive a response to a previous contact, but they could find no record of it. So the BBC couldn't even track an email to Tim Davie. Our complaints process explains how we offer an efficient and fair service to all. It provides the best value for money for all TV licence fee payers, but it does mean we can't guarantee a reply when people contact staff directly, particularly Tim Davie, although he can email you to say he's received your email, but he can't reply. And they went on, many marches and protests take place at the weekend in the UK. And unfortunately, BBC News I can't keep a straight face reading this. Many marches and protests take place at the weekend in the UK. And unfortunately, BBC News is unable to cover all protests that take place.
Sorry, just remind me what their budget is, Brian.
5 billion.
Yes.
£5 billion.
Okay.
We accept that not everyone will agree with each decision, but stories are chosen due to their editorial merit, for instance, if it's breaking news or an update to a recent news story. So here's the BBC. They think they're talking to a 4-year-old, and they're not going to report a huge number of people demonstrating on their doorstep and, of course, protesting outside the BBC itself. David, we're all smiling at the moment, but of course, people shouldn't mistake that for us not understanding how serious it is when the national broadcaster shows itself to be utterly untrustworthy and incompetent.
Yes, and it was very funny. I mean, it was laughable, but you're quite right. The deeper point is that was an article. The BBC said, yes, there was 500,000 people marching through London. Yes, they marched outside the BBC. And they shouted, shame on you, at the BBC. But the issue is, Mr. Gerrish, we, the BBC, define what is news. And we did not define that as news. Therefore, it was not news. That is the problem.
Yeah, thank you for that. Well, let's go on to the second part of the email, which was the subject of the yellow card vaccine adverse reactions. And the BBC said, we're committed to achieving due impartiality in all our output and reflecting a wide range of subject matter and perspectives across our output as a whole. Throughout the pandemic, we have featured a broad range of contributors with scientific, medical and political experience and expertise who we believe could add insight and value to our coverage, and whose views we have examined and challenged on behalf of our audience. We have also covered other anti-lockdown protests in the past. Well, of course, the BBC has never challenged any views. It's just simply promoted the government's own views, which is pro-vaccine. But it went on, just give you a little bit more. BBC News has covered vaccine risks, including the blood clot risk associated with the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine. That was apparently COVID vaccines and blood clots, your questions answered. But in that clip that they sent back to me, of course, they did not do any detailed analysis whatsoever into the official vaccine adverse reactions. Whilst BBC News reported that sore arm and headache most common side effects, there was no suggestion that these were key adverse effects, but rather the most common side effects experienced. You can read more on this in the article below. And then they just pointed another article where the BBC simply puffs up the vaccine companies and simply does not report on the vaccine adverse effect. So I think we have to say pretty strongly today that Tim Davie has shown himself to be utterly incompetent, and he's running an organisation which is not to be trusted in any shape or form. So if you're an overseas viewer and you're still in the mistaken belief that the BBC is the bastion of truth in the UK, we suggest you switch the UK column from here on.
Now, last week, we highlighted this organisation, Edgy Productions, and their musical for end of term school play. Wow, what a year. And this is by Andrew Oxspring and Nick Hayworth. And it says where to start: homeschooling, empty supermarket shelves, social distancing, bubbles, tears, face masks, not being able to hug our grandparents. These have been extraordinary and challenging times, but through it all, heroes have emerged. And with a strength of spirit, hope in your hearts, and a sense of humour, we're coming out the other side. So what better way to commemorate our place in history than a bloomin' good sing-song? And so 10% of the profits are donated to the Captain Tom Foundation. We'll come on back onto that in a second. A teacher, so we've just highlighted a couple of parts of this. This part of the script. The script is available on the website, so if you want to go and have a look at it, please do. So a teacher and her class reflect on the monumental events that have shaped our lives in recent times. They discuss the pandemic and how various aspects of lockdown have put us all in some quite challenging situations. As we look at snapshots of these situations, we see that amongst the sadness and frustration, there have been moments of hope, heroism, and even humor. And there's a song goes with that called Wow, What a Year. And then they have another song called Hero, which is all about celebrating frontline workers. And then another one, Put That Mask On, which is all about considering the rules and restrictions that we were all subjected to during the lockdown and how confusing they could be and how they seem to change from one announcement to the next. And the scenario in the play is that they join 3 experts as they prepare to give another COVID briefing to the nation, in which they'll outline their latest ideas to flatten the curve, and so on. And then the next song is A Shot in the Arm. However, there's light at the end of the tunnel, they say, and the development and rollout of a vaccine. This has been a cause for celebration, and we take a fly-on-the-wall look at how such celebrations may have taken place amongst the scientists responsible. And then it ends with a song called Running Free, because once you've had your shot in the arm, you're then free to run around. Well, we asked last week how many, because we knew of at least 2 schools in the country that were running this so-called musical as their end-of-year school play for year 6s, that's 11-year-olds. But actually, I've had quite a bit of response from people saying, yes, my school's doing it, my school, right across the country and in Scotland as well. Well, one of our viewers very kindly wrote to David Lewis, or wrote to the company, Edgy Productions, and got a response from David Lewis, who is from that company, one of the founders. And so I'm just going to run through a little bit of what he said in his response to this. He said, in its entirety and in context, the musical recounts and focuses on the efforts we as a nation have collectively made to get through lockdown. It celebrates heroes, nurses, doctors, shop assistants, teachers, delivery drivers, parents whom homeschooled their children, and he goes on with a whole list more. He said that Wow, What a Year was written in response to teachers asking for songs and a script for their upper Key Stage 2 classes that allow them to reflect on and process the extraordinary and unique experiences of the last 12 months. Since publication, hundreds of schools have requested this musical for their end-of-year performances. When performed in context of the scripted scenes that deal with mask wearing and vaccination, the 2 associated songs serve only to recount that this was part of our collective experience. Well, the titles don't imply that, but anyway, the script's there if you want to read it for yourself. Any accusations that this musical is propaganda for a vaccine or mask agenda have come exclusively from individuals who have not